Morning, Eden. So we're going to dedicate the class today to the neshama of Mordechai Shmuel ben Pinchas, whose levaya is later this afternoon. And with Hashem's help, Mashiach comes, and that becomes an unnecessary thing of the past. Okay, so you may have noticed from the syllabus that there's going to be a little bit of an awkward order over the next little while. So we last week we did 88, 89. Now we skipped 90. As I mentioned, 90 is not super relevant halachas, practically speaking, with regarding to one who wants to eat the udder of a cow and how to extract the milk and what the prohibitions are. It's a complex set of laws, actually, just for the fun of it, random information. That's just fun. The origins, one of the origins, at least in the Gemara, for the law of the udder, is Rabbi Meir's wife, named Beruya, who was a scholar in her own right, quoted a number of times in the Gemara. And the Gemara says that the sages tell us that whatever the Torah prohibits in one area permits somewhere else. So she challenged and said, where does the Torah permit milk and meat? And the response was the udder. The udder is milk and meat, but it's not halachically milk and meat because the milk is still inside the cow. It's not considered meat, at least not biblically speaking. So from there, spawn, okay, so how do you kosherize the udder? And that's the laws of chal. It's just an interesting phenomenon that today, with genetically modified foods, it's literally the case that whatever Torah says you can't have is permitted somewhere else. They have fake-in and fake shrimp and all kinds of things. So at this point, it's like mamish like that. Obviously, I can't tell you how accurate these flavors are, but I'm sure they will get more accurate over time anyway. Close parentheses. So we skipped 90. 91, 92, we already learned in round one together with Kofei, right? We started with 105, which was the transference of flavor. That brought us to 91, which is also the transference of flavor. And then we went to 92, which is about the transference of flavor to such a degree that it causes the thing that absorbed to become itself a source, otherwise known as Hanan. That was Kufay Tzadik Al Tzadik Beis, which is why we started with that, to get the ideas of transference of flavor, right? And we went back to the beginning. Pei Zayin, the essential prohibition of milk and meat, what that means, and then Pei Ches and Pei Tes, the rabbinic enactments about separating milk and meat, not having them on the same table, not eating them together, and the separations between them, how much time to wait, right? And now, in the next three Simanim, 93, 94, and 95, which is what we're going to be doing next. I think we're going till the next test. I believe after 95 is the next test.
Not bad.
Or we're doing something else between then. I have to look. Maybe I missed that. Sorry, I'm looking at the room for a second. Right? We're going to do, next three Simonim leads to the next test.
So once we finish
93, 94, 95, and then we have a test on 88, 89, 93, 94, 95. 93, 94, 95 is like its own unit, which is in some ways the most practical of them all, in that they're the most common of them all. 88, 89 is very practical also, as we learned, not to have milk and meat in the same table, how long to wait, understanding why we're waiting, and so on and so forth. But the sum total of those halachas are rather straightforward. Don't eat on the same table and wait for 6 hours after meat and wait for 1 hour after milk, right? The sum total of those halachas are rather straightforward. 93, 94, 95 are also very practical, but they're less straightforward. Now, these are the principles of 93 is going to be not to use a pot that was once used for meat and then use it for milk and vice versa. And what happens if I did? Which happens all the time. I by mistake fried a milk egg in my I by mistake fried an egg with cheese in my pan that I just fried schnitzel with, or my pan that I usually use to fry steaks, whatever it is. Oh, good morning. And that's going to be 93, which of course is very common. 94 is going to be you accidentally use your milk ladle to scoop out your fleishik soup, which is also very, very common. That's 94. And then 95, right? So 94 is going to be using like utensils from meat to milk and milk to meat, which is very common questions. And then 95 is going to be the question of, I used my milk pot for pariv, or the other way around. I need my fleshik pot for pariv, my dairy pot for parva, my meat pot for parva, and what that does to the parva food. Those are probably the most common questions you're going to encounter in your kitchen. 93, 94, 95. And that's our next big chunk before the test. Now, if you look at the syllabus, you may notice something's interesting. We're going to start with 93. We're going to do one sif of 94. We're going to go to 95 and then come back to the rest of 94. Strange order. So I last night I checked in with Rabbi Barber, who's the one that created this syllabus, and asked him what his thinking is. And I understand where he's coming from. I may have structured it differently, but it doesn't matter. I understand where he's coming from. So we're going to go through. And essentially, it's like this, just so we understand where we're going. So as I mentioned, 93 is the use of the wrong pot. Right? I used the fleshik pot for milk and a milchik pot for meat. 94 is I used a fleshik utensil for milchik and vice versa. Right? A meat utensil for dairy and a dairy utensil for meat. Right? And 95 is going to be the parva thing. Right? I used the pot for parva. What does it do to the flavor? That 95 is a principle that we're going to have to unpack next week, which is the principle of not bar not, which means 2-degree separation flavor. It's not directly milk to meat or meat to milk, but there's a flavor in between. There's a parva in the middle. Okay, so it's not bar not. This literally means the absorption of a flavor, son of absorption of a flavor. So it's 2-degree separation. Now that principle of not bar not, which is going to be the whole tzaddik 95, 2-degree separation of flavor, is going to become relevant for certain sections of 94. In certain sections of 94, where you're using the wrong utensil for the wrong type, your dairy for meat and meat for dairy, some of those cases are going to involve understanding the principle of the 2-step separation. And that's why he's telling us to learn 95 before 94. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. So we're going to follow this program. All right. So having said that, almost all of the next 3 simanim come down to almost one line in the Gemara. So we clear on where we're going the next till the test. And it's the next 3 weeks, basically, till the next break. And again, at the end of the break is going to be the test. So that's the program. We clear what we're doing? 93, 94, 95. These very relevant, very common questions that comes up in the kitchen. I washed the dish in the wrong place. I used the wrong fork. All that stuff is going to be addressed over the next 3 weeks. Really, really, really the most relevant, the most common, certainly. So now all of it comes down to almost, again, as I mentioned, one line in the Gemara. A few more lines, but basically one line. And the line reads as follows. I'm reading it in Hebrew and then I'll translate. Tanya, we learned in the Mishnah text, says the Gemara, and a Brisa. Kedera, a pot, a dish, shebishal basar, in which you cooked meat, lo yavasha b'chalav, don't go and later cook milk or dairy. V'im bishal, and if you did go ahead and cook it, so you cooked milk in a meat pot, the nice and tam, then the prohibition extends if the flavor can be transferred. End quote from the Gemara. This spawns basically 3 simanim, 3 sections of the Gemara of Shulchan Aruch, the next 3 chapters. Again, more different quotes from the Gemara all over, but that's pretty much the essence of it.
What was it? If you did, and if the flavor.
If you did, then you reckon it based on the transfer of flavor. Benois and tam. Doesn't say benois and tam and therefore what? Right? So let's unpack this Gemara. First of all, it says 2 different things. First, it says, don't do it. Don't use one pot for the other. So we have a lechatchila. We have an instruction of lechatchila. In the first instance, do not use one pot for the other. Even if there isn't going to be a transfer of flavor. Right? It doesn't say, so long as there's no transfer of flavor, go ahead and use one pot for the other. It says, don't use the pot one for the other. And if you did, then you'll determine whether it's prohibited based on transference of flavor. So the first thing that the Gemara tells you is a first instance. In a first instance, don't use one part for the other. But it doesn't say just because you did, now it's prohibited. It says if it did, halacha number 2, determine the prohibition based on transference of flavor. Okay, what's the law of transference of flavor? Now, to that end, we open up a whole Pandora's box, which is everything we've been learning till now about the nature of transference of flavor. Is it a clear rishon? Is it a klisheni? How much flavor is being transferred? Right? All of these things, sorry?
Review everything you've done.
Oh, but now practically applying them to the most common case in your kitchen, which is your pot. Because till now we've been talking about transference of flavor between meat to milk and milk to meat, or prohibited food to permitted food, which is, as you know, very rare. Very rare in a kosher kitchen do you have a transference of flavor between literally meat and milk. It happens, but not very common. Now we're learning that the same thing applies to dishes. Because if you did use the wrong dish, says the Gemara, nice and tam, determined based on transference of flavor. Okay, so how did that transfer happen? And did it happen? And did it happen to a degree where it's going to prohibit? That's what we have to unpack over the next 3 simanim. Right, which is why all these things come down to this one line of the Gemara. Okay, so there are a few, again, we already know there's a number of factors when it comes into the question of transference of flavor. And the first is going to be, inside the Gimel, the first is going to be literally using the wrong pot, which is the literal case of the Gemara. The literal case of the Gemara is you have a meat pot that you use for milk and vice versa. So when you're thinking about that pot, that's a meat pot, and now you use it for milk, what do you have to consider when you're thinking of the transference of flavor? So number one, you have to think of when it was last used.
So what kind of pot it is? If it's an earthenware vessel or a stainless steel vessel?
Earthenware vessel, stainless steel vessel. That's item number 2. So first of all, when was it used last? Number 2, what's the material? What else do you have to consider? Sorry?
Heat.
Okay, so heat, yes, is a klish and klisheni. But let's imagine, because the case in the Gemara and the Shulchan Aruch is going to be where you went ahead and cooked it. So it's on the flame, it's a klish, it's the highest form of heat, plus you have liquid. Right, so the transference of flavor. But number 1, you're right. You have to consider when was it last used. Why is that relevant?
24 hours, it changes the.
Because you have a principle of nice and tam. So let's unpack this.
Anything that wasn't used within 24 hours.
We have a principle, tam ke'ikr, which we already know. When flavor of transfer happens, it's as if the item itself is there. Which means the question of transference of flavor is only when the item actually isn't there. If the item is there, then you don't need to have the principle tam ke'ikr, the flavor is like the thing itself is there, because the thing itself is there. Which means your pot has to be clean. If your pot wasn't clean and there was actual residue of meat, all the laws we're learning now won't apply.
But also if it's batal b'shishi, no.
Okay, we'll get to that in a second, because now we're talking about the amount, right? Because we only said 2 considerations so far. When was it used last? And material. The next thing we have to consider is how much flavor. So those are 3 things you have to consider. When was it used last? What type of utensil is it, and does it have the capacity to transfer flavor? And 3, how much flavor is being transferred?
How can you measure the flavor in the pot?
Correct. That's going to come. That's right. Related to number 3 is how do you even measure it? Correct. So we'll get to all that. So let's unpack each of these things. Starting with number 1, when was it used last? So again, the principle is tam ke'ikr. The flavor is like the thing itself is there. So if the thing itself is there, you're not applying this principle because the thing itself is there. So if your pot was not clean and there was actual pieces of meat left over from your last meal, then everything we're talking about now doesn't apply. And now you have to apply the principles we learned in Kufay and Sadak Aleph. Right, which is then the amount, what's the ratio? Was it salted? Was it cooked? Was it not grilled? All that stuff. Because you have actual meat now and milk. Here we're not talking about that. Here it's only the pot. Okay. Because we're relying on the principle of tam ke'ikr, the flavor is like the thing is there, but the thing itself is not there. There are limitations to that. Specifically, the only time we say that the flavor itself is as if the item itself is there, is if the flavor is acting faithfully on behalf of the item from which the flavor came out.
Meaning if the flavor transfers in a good, positive way.
Correct.
As opposed to negative.
That's
flavor.
correct. So if it gives what's nice, and I was thinking last night about exactly how to translate the word pagam. Nice and tam levgam. It gives a flavor to,
What's alive? Like what's,
so that's what the word I came up with, detriment.
that's what you mean.
So it gives a detrimental flavor. Or nice and tam shvach. It gives a complementary flavor. So the only time the flavor itself is treated as if the item is there is if the flavor is being faithful to the place it came from, which means it has to be a complementary flavor. If the thing itself is there, we don't really care what kind of flavor it's giving. The item is there. Unless it's so far gone that even a dog wouldn't eat it. That's when we say
Like
the
if
food's
it's
so far
soap.
gone. Like if it came a soap.
But it's interesting.
Mm.
But Joseph says that you're allowed to use a dishwasher for milk and meat so long as you wait 24 hours. And the whole tshuva is the reason why is because soap is added and the
So
soap.
nice and tough, yes.
Yeah.
So everybody will agree with that, except for the first instance. So almost okay, I'm gonna get ahead of ourselves because we're gonna talk about that in our
Okay.
Chazar
I just
Lamaisa.
always never understood that why it's okay to do like.
But now you understand,
Yeah.
right? So we're gonna talk about that in Chazar Lamaisa. Well, we will talk about that.
Because it makes it detrimental.
Because the soap
That's the-
Correct.
basically kills
It kills the
whatever.
positivity that the flavor would have transferred. But again, that's not if it's ba'en. That's not if the actual food item is there. The food item is there, it doesn't make a difference if it's in tam gam or not.
No, because
It's only for tam ki'ikr that the flavor.
Very common in a dishwasher.
but a dishwasher will have pieces at the bottom. It's nullified.
That's the big
because of
question.
the
Okay,
heat.
so this is the big question. That's the big question. And then that changes l'chatchila b'diavad, but we'll get to that.
You don't even have to clean out the bottom. According
Yeah, we're gonna get to that because that changes also l'chatchila b'diavad, right? Okay, but yes, but this is where we're going. This is exactly where we're going.
The dishwasher?
It's only.
I'm not so sure if it's a machlokes so much as a chumrah as we'll see. Well, I don't want to get ahead of
It's
ourselves. But,
by
yeah.
Ashkenazim. It's only
It's a
the
question of
Sephardim
But this is the reason for the chumrah, because if you have actual pieces, you cannot rely on these principles.
Yeah.
At least not completely always.
even if you wouldn't be. But again, the soap nullifies that taste of whatever's left.
But again,
over.
if I have actual pieces of meat, nullifying flavor is irrelevant because I have the pieces of meat there.
But
right, again-
but the meat wouldn't be consumed by even a dog at that point because it's like
Maybe yes, maybe no. Okay, well, I'm not. You're right. You're right. But this is the principles that lead to those questions. Yes, you're 100% right though. These are exactly the principles that we're going to be unpacking.
Give it a try, give your dog, you see if he's gonna.
Don't agree because it has a rancid flavor.
Yeah.
The heat of the dishwasher.
Okay, there's also a question of if the nice and of gam is coming from in it itself or it's coming from somewhere else. It's also another issue. Okay, we are going to get to all of that, yes. All right. So again, because this question is tam ki'ikr, you don't have the item itself. You only have the flavor coming out of it. So the flavor has to be faithful to its origin in order to constitute that it itself is bringing the item for tam ki'ikr to work. The tam has to be faithful to the ikr. And if it's nice and tam gam, it's giving a detrimental flavor and it's not faithful to its origin, and then it won't prohibit the other. Okay, this is the principle of ben yoimai. Ben yoimai literally means the son of a day, literally translated, which means it was used within the last 24 hours. There is an opinion, Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam, which say it's not 24 hours, but the next day, the next morning, which means if you used your pot in the afternoon for dinner, to prepare dinner, the next morning, it's already considered nice and tam of gam. It's already considered detrimental flavor.
But you didn't have the days of sun.
Sorry,
Hard to understand the logic
Yeah.
behind that.
essentially, what's why?
Because the sun, you're saying Ben Yoma means the day of the sun. So a sun.
Son of a day, not the sun of the moon, not the sun in the sky. Sun as in like a child.
Oh. Okay.
Ben Yoimai, the son of today. Which means it was used today. If it's the next morning, it wasn't used today.
So if you do it before Mincha,
And then the next day, you use
then
it
the
for.
next day it's Mariv already.
It's already not. No, that's the next morning.
Next morning.
Nice and tam of gam ready.
So that's like it's like setting a minimum. like-
It's setting a minimum the next day,
Well,
correct?
you know, it's basically English, right? It's
At
basically you
least.
have one day. and you
Is
have the
there a
next.
time limit that they set on this?
Okay, so that's talking
If
about.
they're saying it's just the next day, is there like a minimum 12 hours or something?
No,
I don't know.
the next day. Elliot is correct. It's based on the base of Mikdash because in the base of Mikdash they had to like kosherize most of the dishes because you can't leave certain carbonates can't be left over the next morning. So you have to like get rid of it before the next day and the night before the next morning. But I don't want to go all the way down there. But you are correct. That's where it comes from. Now we do not rule this way, like Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam, that by the time the next morning comes around, it's considered detrimental flavor. We go with the view that the 24-hour period, so 24 hours from when it was used, is when it becomes a negative flavor. So that way it's a universal 24 hours. It doesn't change winter to summer based on how long the night happens to be. All right. But because this opinion exists, as we know, that sometimes two stringencies equal leniency. So there are times when we will apply this second view as a sniff lakel, as a support, when we want to be lenient in some other case. So that will come up actually in Kuf Gimel 103. Okay. So far we're clear. This is the principles of the main principle here. There are a couple more things that are going to come up. First of all, we already know the machlokes, right? Okay, so back to the main point. It's going to depend if it was used in the last 24 hours, if there was a 24-hour time elapsed between when the meat was used, between when it was used for meat to when it was used for milk, or vice versa. There's 24-hour time elapsed. The flavor is negative, then your food is kosher. Because the flavor transferred wasn't faithful to the ikr, so it doesn't have that property of ruining the flavor ruining the item it went into. You have to remember, this is only post factum, because the Gemara opened up by saying, do not use the pot one for the other. If you did, measure the flavor transfer. And now we're measuring the flavor transfer, and it's a negative flavor, and thus we're deciding it's going to be kosher. What about the pot itself? So your food is kosher. What about the pot itself? That's also going to come a discussion now as well. What's the story with the pot itself? And we have three different views that are go through all the extremes. One view says like this: if I used it for meat, now 24 hours later, it was used post factum by mistake for milk. What's the status of the pot now? So one view says it's now a dairy pot. Why? Because your meat flavor was negative, so the milk never became prohibited, and that milk which you just used served as a kind of hagala, served as a kind of kosherizing, because kosherizing is to boil out the pot to the point that it extracts the flavor that was in there. And that's what you just did. You boiled the pot with milk, you extracted the meat flavor, it was negative flavor, so it didn't ruin your milk, so now it's a milk dairy pot. So it just switched from meat to dairy. View number one. View number two says, no. You actually can't use your pot neither for meat nor for milk. You cannot use your pot for meat because you just use it for milk. That's for sure. Now you cannot even use it for milk because what did our sages tell us? Our sages told us you should never use a pot from dairy to meat, even if it happens to be old flavor. It's only post factum, which means our sages are concerned with the flavor, the negative flavor remaining even after 24 hours. Even though post factum is telling you it's fine, but our sages are telling you that the flavor is still there until you do proper kosherizing. And we are stringent about that. Thus, they'll say, until you do kosherizing, you cannot use it for milk because it still retains the negative flavor of the meat. Just like to begin with, we told you not to use it for milk after 24 hours because even though the flavor is negative and it's not going to ruin your food, we tell you not to use it. So that enactment stays in effect until you kosherize it, even though you happen to have used milk in the middle. And therefore, not use it for milk or meat.
So the
That's view two.
detrimental flavor of one or the other cannot coexist. That's the idea, right?
This view would say, what do you mean by they cannot coexist?
They can't, that makes it invalid. Even though it's detrimental.
Oh,
It's
yes.
detrimental, but.
We cannot allow you
It's
to,
also detrimental.
correct.
It'll be 24 hours after you.
It doesn't matter.
Mistakenly put the milk in the thing, but what's no good because you still mixed for the flavor of the meat and the milk, even though it's.
Correct. So because it's right, you mixed milk and meat now. Now our sages told us that you should not use a detrimental flavor in the first instance. Great, then don't use this detrimental flavor in the first instance until you kosherize it. Not for milk, not for meat. That's view two. So view one is it transfers from meat to milk because you kosherize it using milk, and now it's a dairy pot. View two is neither until you kosherize it. Not milk, not meat. View number three is
Use it for parab.
even better.
Today's
You
meat.
can use it for either.
Right.
Now it's a reset. Because you kosherized it, the flavor is negative, reset.
But
Go
again,
back
this
to the
is-
beginning.
this
You
is
can use it
gonna-
for either.
But this is gonna depend on what kind of item you're actually kosherizing, because like, for example, not everything can be kosherized.
Say it again?
It's gonna depend on what vessel you're kosherizing, because not all vessels can be kosherized. For example, Teflon.
Okay, so it's gonna depend on, okay, so that's very good. It's gonna depend on what kind of vessel. It's also gonna depend on whether or not the milk filled up your pot so much that it actually kosherized everything. If you only put like a quarter of a pot, then you can kosherize the top half.
It would never be the case, but it's almost never right to the top.
So deliberate.
Unless it boils up so much. That's what I'm saying. Yes, you're correct.
If you cover it, then it will,
If you cover it, maybe. Yeah, we'll get into the end of the covering.
Of course, that means it's not ben yoma.
Sorry?
Of course, it means it's not ben yoma. If it was the reset and the milk was last, so it would have to be 24 hours later,
Okay,
that then it was reset.
that's also mentioned in some of the commentaries. It has to be reset at the beginning. But there are others that say no, because that even right away it's considered kosherized to reset because
So right away, you could put meat in it, according to that opinion.
apparently, yeah, you clean it out and you use meat. It's which
1
is
hour
wild.
later, after you had the milk in the original fleshik pot, now you could put in another meat. dish.
It's wild, yeah. And even though it's like it's curiosity, and you'll see in the Taz on the side there's a Taz there which discusses this. But yeah, it's a wild opinion. Yep. Now the Shulchan Aruch, however, is of the view number 2, which is you cannot use it for either. That's what the Shulchan Aruch says. The stringent view, which is view number 2, you cannot use it for either. Right? And even moreover, even if
So you're saying if you have a meat pot that you used, you waited 24 hours and you cooked milk in it.
yeah,
Cooking the milk in it kosherizes the pot
According
and
to one view.
converts it from meat to milk.
from milk to parav.
But that's because I guess after 24 hours, whatever residue is there is considered
right.
like dust.
Look at the
earth or
Taz. You'll see the
whatever.
Taz there. You see the Taz on the side. Taz number 1. What is it? How does it read? Does it say have it there? Taz 1
For
on
the fruit to
93.
be permitted, there must be 60 times the.
No, that's not number 1.
No. So
Look for Taz Aleph.
There's no Taz Aleph here. There's only
Yeah.
Shaf.
Hmm?
So there's only the
well,
Shaf.
there is size off, we just didn't, I guess they didn't put it.
Didn't put it in?
It's not in the, it's not
Okay, because he doesn't actually. Okay, that makes sense because he doesn't actually rule that way, but he just explains it.
So what does the Taz say here?
Here, you have to have 24 hours and you have to have shishim.
That's already beige. That's not Aleph.
Uh,
Oh, no. Okay, no. Later at the end of the Taz, where he explains the Bala Itter, because the Bala Itter is the one that was lenient. At the end of the Taz, he explains the later, and it doesn't matter. We don't rule that way anyway. We have the view that was stringent one. The Shulchan Aruch writes you can't use it for either. There are more rights that you could use it for parav. We could use that pot for parav, right? Because he's going back. He's going to the opinion which said that the milk was a kind of kosherizing, but still sticking to the prohibition not to, in the first instance, use something for the opposite type. But technically, went through a kosherizing, and therefore he says you can use parav. Right? However, it should be noted that when we get to Tzaddik Daled, we're going to see that the Ramah tells us to be stringent and not use the pot even for parav either. That's going to come in 94. Okay. Now, the question now becomes, what happens if I used not, so let's say I had a meat pot, and in between, and at this point now I boiled vegetables. So I made a parav soup. And then it's 24 hours since the last time I used meat. Did that parav soup kosherize my meat pot that I can now use for milk?
It says it's permitted according to here. Haggah. What's Haggah?
Haggah means, Haggah means note.
Oh, but other things, non-meat.
Okay, that was the
or
first
dairy
case. That's
meat
just
are
mentioned.
permitted to be
Like I just
cooked.
mentioned. That's if you used it with it. That's if you had meat pot. 24 hours later, you use milk. There are more of the view that the milk kosherizes the pot, so you can use it for parav.
But it only
you can't- but you still have
the
the-
pot because it's batal b'shishi.
No, because it's negative flavor, and you boiled out the flavor with using milk. The milk boiled out the flavor. It's a hagala. It's a full kosherizing.
Mhm.
It happens to not be water, but you kosherized it because you extracted the flavor. It's just that we
But
have the
wasn't it extracted into the milk to a certain degree?
so
Because it's over 24 hours.
it's no longer.
No,
That's right.
Detrimental flavor.
Detrimental flavor. You extracted it. The only thing is, you have the rabbinic prohibition not to use a detrimental flavor, even when, even though it doesn't have a negativity. And therefore, it says, but part of you can use.
Yeah.
Sorry, but again, as I mentioned, 94. The Ramah says we're stringent. Now I'm asking a different case, which is you used parav, made a parav soup after your meat. Does that part of soup require become hagala?
Not after 24.
It's been,
Not even 24 hours, even within 24 hours.
What about if the soup has like sharp foods like garlic, ginger, or onion inside?
It's gonna come up in that'll come up in 96, I want to say.
So does
whatever
does that change
Maybe, but let's just assume it's not. You made a vegetable soup.
okay?
You made a part of a vegetable soup. Did you kosherize your meat pot now that you can use it for milk? It's a machlekes, actually. And it's gonna come up. I don't know if they have it here. They put
Does it gonna depend
they
on
have the
whether
kudus
or not
kesef on the side from the shach in the they have a shach number 2. What did it say? Shach number 2 on the notes on the side.
The Rashal says that this specifically
Not the Rashal.
refers to shach. The shach.
Okay, yeah.
So the Rashal says that this specifically refers to pot covers which are so
No, not that one. That's gonna come later. Another one.
Well,
Okay, Nekudas Kesef is the book written by the shach. It's also on the margins of the Shulchan Aruch.
it must be 60 times.
And he writes like this. He writes that if here's my Nekudas Kesef. Yeah. Ooh, it's a long Nekudas Kesef. Bottom line is that the Nekudas Kesef is of the view that if your vegetable soup boiled up all the way, then that would serve as a kosherizing.
So there's
Which
no
is pretty cool.
transference of flavor at all in that capacity because you waited 24 hours.
You extracted the meat flavor.
But really, it's
Because you-
relying on batal b'shishi.
So, but no, it's not. It's extraction of flavor. What does kosherizing do? When you
It
boil,
nullifies the forbidden.
no, it extracts the forbidden.
Well, by
Oh,
nullifying.
so
it.
then,
No, by extracting it.
But when you extract it, if you extract it and it's more than 60
60 from what to what?
from forbidden, if you had a certain, let's say 24.
You have a pot you use for pork,
That's for some, but I'm saying
A
like
pot-
a cholent pot that's full of
a pot that we
stuff
use for
you-
pork.
Yeah. Okay.
metal pot, and you boiled it over in water. You kosherized it, hagala. What
Right.
did you do? You extracted the flavor that was there.
But
So he's saying you do the same thing with a part of a vegetable soup. What's the difference?
It's gonna be meat now, the soup is gonna be meat, it's because they extracted it, it went into the vegetables, so.
So
Yeah,
the okay, good point. If it's within 24 hours, you would say such a thing, let's say, but then you can use it later for milk
But this is
Yeah.
not.
because you kosherize it. You extract the flavor from meat.
Yeah.
But this isn't talking about chas v'shalom non-kosher meat or nevela. It's talking about.
So it's not in the Shulchan Aruch itself. It's in the Kudas Kesef. It's in the commentaries on the side, which I thought maybe it has it there. But
So you're saying
maybe in
that
the summaries it'll
if
be
I
there.
borrowed a pot from a neighbor who didn't use it in 24 hours and it had the grease of, let's say, chazer inside, and I
No,
boiled.
you have to clean again. If it's be'en, it's different.
You have to.
If it's be'en, if the actual item is there, it's different. Here, if it's only flavor, so it's clean, it's completely fully clean, and it's just a question of flavor that was absorbed. You boil it over, you hagala, and you use it. And this Nekudas Kesef is arguing that you can even do that with part of the food, not just water. Yeah, others disagree, like the Beis Yosef,
What the Rambam
which
says.
is why the Beis Yosef does not. The Shulchan Aruch doesn't bring it in here. The Shulchan Aruch doesn't mention, right? He doesn't mention that if in between you use part of it becomes kosher. The Shulchan Aruch does not mention that because he disagrees with this premise.
because it's Hagala, but it's Hagala of a flavor.
That's the Beis Yosef's argument, which is why he does not bring it in the Shulchan Aruch. Nonetheless, the commentators on the Shulchan Aruch are like, hey, because it's Kesef specifically, why'd you skip this important detail that you can kosherize in the middle with other flavors, like part of a soup? Okay. Now we come to the question of the covering. Yeah, we're clear so far?
The soup part of that?
So that's what he asked. And if it's within 24 hours, it wouldn't be part of. It would be a meat
But
soup.
that's within it. They wouldn't have kosherized it through Hagala if it was within 24 hours. It's only after 24 hours that you can say that it cancels out the the flavor.
We are stringent. We are stringent to wait 24 hours before we do Hagala. Because we're like, we want to push it farther. But in theory, it can be done in 10 minutes.
But aren't you supposed to clean it before you do the Hagala?
We are
Or
clean it,
the
yes.
stringency?
Clean it, yes, because again, if it's be'en, if the actual item is there, then you're not just extracting flavor. There's an actual piece of isser. Hagala is only about extracting flavor. Right? So in theory, 5 minutes after you used it, you clean it out, you can do Hagala. We wait 24 hours because we're adding a layer of protection by making it negative flavor too.
Anyway, cleaning
But in
something out that's greasy, of course it's greasy because it cooked meat, requires soap.
Sorry?
Requires soap.
So that's another nice in time of Gam.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm not so sure. Okay, good question, good point. But the nice in time of Gam may not work for the flavor that's absorbed within the pot.
Mhm.
because you happen to use soap.
Yes, on the surface layer.
Yeah, but yes and no. Okay, this gets back to the question about the dishwasher, which again we'll get to.
But like, for example, what kind of soap did they use back then that would have, like, we're using.
It doesn't matter. They didn't use soap at all. What did they use soap?
Exactly.
They used to use earth. They used to use ash, actually.
Right.
We learned that
No,
earlier.
Lye. Oh, lye.
What's lye?
Lye.
What is that?
Yeah, it's
Like soap.
but they would make it from something, right?
The Shulchan Aruch describes them using like a mixture of like ash and water for like cleaning. It's like
Because
cleaning
it's
product.
abrasive, so it would.
Yeah,
help
because it would
to
scrape
clean
everything
it.
off. Yeah.
Right.
At any rate, okay.
And
So again, in theory, on the base halacha level, one doesn't need to wait 24 hours for Agala. We do, again, to add that extra layer of protection, but in theory, not necessary. Okay, those halachas of Agala are going to come up again in later Simanim. The final detail of this Siman, which is really just one Sif, that Ramah is a little bit elaborate, is the question of the cover. A cover used in the last 24 hours. Is it any different than the pot used in the last 24 hours? What would you say, logically? No different, right? And that's the majority view. Pot, cover, same difference. It absorbs flavor. 24 hours later, it's negative. Within 24 hours, it's positive. That's pretty much all it is, right? However, there is one source, the Hagoy Shire Dura, which is an early Ashkenazic collector of halacha, predates even Ramah, who writes that the covering of a pot never becomes ben yoim, never becomes any ben yoimai. It's always considered positive flavor. Doesn't explain why. Just says it as a fact that the covering is treated more stringent than the pot itself. The pot itself would be detrimental flavor after 24 hours. The covering does not become detrimental flavor. Doesn't explain why, right? And the Ramah himself actually says, look, I'm stringent because that's our custom here, but it's a stringency that has no reason, and I'm just doing it because we all do. Direct quote from the Ramah. Yeah. Upper? Watch
this. Really.
Right, should be the same. But he's saying stringent that it never becomes 20, it never becomes detrimental. It's always positive.
It's not his opinion, so it's.
It's the Shari Dura who writes that the cover never becomes a detrimental flavor, even after 24 hours. And then Ramah says a stringency that has no reason, but I'm doing it because we all do it. It's a direct quote. Where are we? So it's my practice because that's the common custom. And this is a stringency that has no reason. Now, obviously, if the Shari Dura wrote it, even if the Ramah rejects the reasons and says he can't find a legitimate reason, obviously there are going to be others who will find a legitimate reason. So what is that legitimate reason that would make a pot different than a regular? What would be the logic to make a cover different than the rest of the pot, and that the cover never becomes detrimental flavor, even after 24 hours? What would be the logic? So we have two different views. Where are we? Okay, view one is that the steam and the smell that goes up and down that steam is more has more impact than flavor absorption, and thus it lasts longer. Reason number one from Teres Achatas.
Longer, how much longer?
Forever. Forever, apparently.
Really long.
Really longer. Rashal, however, says, no, the reason is because if the pot is on a tip, then in the center tip, you're going to have actual residue.
Just the highest point for the heats to reach.
There's going to be actual residue. That's very difficult to clean out. And we learned already that explained earlier, that once you have a piece of actual meat or milk, then everything we learned is off the table. Because everything we're learning is about, if it's only tam ke'ikr, the flavor is like the thing itself is there. But the thing itself is there, then negative flavor is not a factor anymore because you have the. So apparently they had pointy covers on their pots, which would mean that the whole halacha doesn't apply if you have a straight pot cover. Even the stringency wouldn't apply. B, according to the Shvus, according to the, where did I read it? The Bekiva, no, it's in the Taz, the Shach, sorry, Shach. Oh, no, sorry, Taz, that if you know that the content of your pot is more than 60 times the amount of whatever could be stuck in that little point, then you're anyways nullified by 60. Okay? So essentially, as we're going to learn from the Ramah and from the Shach, because this is a stringency that you're struggling to find a reason, the slightest reason to be lenient, we're going to be lenient. The slightest reason. For example, Shach says, if your pot, if your cover, if it wasn't on long enough to cause this thing to go up and down, then forget about it, it's all fine. Other things like that. We're going to have, I said that Ramah even says that. All right? The Ramah himself says that. No, he just said that if you have any reason to be lenient, because again, this is a stringency that he finds no reason for. Okay, and then finally, the Ramah is going to be discussing the cover, assuming it's within 24 hours. So we're not doing stringency; we're doing it by the basic halacha. The cover has been used within the last 24 hours, so it's a positive flavor. The question becomes: is the pot hot? Is the cover hot? And you have the tata gover issue: is it klisheni, and some of the things of Kofei and Tzadik Aleph will be applied here as well at the end of the Ramah, in terms of you use a milchik pot to cover your fleshik dish. Both were used within the last 24 hours. Your fleshik dish is full of fleshik items right now, and you just took a milchik cover and put it on. What now? And your milchik cover was used that morning. What now?
Very, very
So it's gonna-
hot cover and a cold
Needs
pot.
60 times the volume. of
You need
the
6
cover.
so 6 times 60 times. When was it last used? Is the one on bottom cold, top hot, or the other way around? They're both hot. That's going to be discussed as well. Right, so your fleshik pot's boiling, then definitely it's going to cause a transference because tata gavar. But what happens if it's a cold pot, but you use the hot milk cover? Okay, that's going to come up. Okay, so that is regard to Tzadik Gimel 93. And we're going to be learning, as I mentioned, Sif 1 of 94. Sif 1 of 94 okay, essentially covers the following issue, which is you used a, first of all, clear on 93, on the principles. Sorry?
For now, I think.
Yeah, the basic principles are there's no actual food item. It's only flavor. Flavor is only prohibitive when it's positive, not detrimental. After 24 hours, flavor becomes detrimental. It's the basic principle. Everything else is a build-off of that. That's basically the essential principle. So even though you shouldn't in the first instance, post factum, you have to determine if there is a negative or positive flavor. Now, in terms of 60 times, which we didn't mention, so as a rule, there's not 60 times in the content of the pot against the pot itself, as a rule. Unless you happen to know that this is a brand new pot, and all I ever did with it was fry a salami on it. So then I know that there's 60 times the amount. But otherwise, you can't assume that there's 60 times the amount in the content of the pot versus what's absorbed in the actual walls of the pot.
60 times the content of the walls of the pot.
You have to have in the content 60 times the amount of what's absorbed in the walls of the pot.
Yeah.
So rarely would you ever have,
Since you don't know how much was absorbed.
you don't know how much was absorbed. You have to assume it's everywhere, right? Unless you happen to know it's a brand new pot and all I did was fry salami. So I know there's very, very little meat absorbed there. And now making a milk French onion soup. And the French onion soup is definitely 60 times the amount of that salami. Other than that, you have to assume it's against the entire pot, which is
It will
extremely
invalidate-
rare that you have 60,
Validate the content.
which you invalidate the content.
Generally.
Generally speaking, correct.
I
Okay.
don't understand. So if you fried a salami on there,
And you know, that's all there was.
that's
A new
all
pot.
that it was.
And then you made a French onion soup.
Then
So
the French onion soup would be.
if the French onion soup is 60 times the amount of your salami, then it would be nullified, right? Even if it was used 25 minutes ago.
Because you know for a fact.
But you know for a fact you nullified it. But if you didn't, if it's a regularly used meat pot, you assume the meat flavor is everywhere in the pot, right? And you can't assume that there's 60 times in the content of your pot against the entire pot. It's very rare that that's the case. All right. Now the next Sif 1 of Tzadik Dal, which we're also going to be learning this week, is many of the principles are similar. As I mentioned, it comes from the same Gemara. The Gemara says, don't use a pot for meat, for milk. And if you did, measure by transference of flavor. So if that's the case, I have a boiling pot. of a meat soup and I used a dairy ladle. It's the same thing. I'm using a dairy pot, my ladle, for meat content. I just pulled it out of my soup. So it's going to be the same principle, right? Assuming that the ladle was used in the last 24 hours. So it's a positive flavor. So now what do I have to do? I have to nullify the flavor of dairy in my ladle by 60 in my meat soup. Now, in this case, it's doable. In the case of the pot inside the gimel, it's very difficult to imagine that my meat pot has 60 times the amount of milk absorption in that pot that was used yesterday.
Practically, how does a person measure that? How do you measure that?
You measure that by, okay, that's a good question.
How do you measure something? The woman saying, I put in the wrong ladle, I put in the milchik ladle into the fleshik stew.
Did you make a very big soup today?
Yeah, I made a very big soup.
So it's a massive soup because you have a lot of guests. Most likely that you nullify it by 60.
You get
How do you
the
know?
the volume of the ladle.
The
volume of the ladle.
Volume
I
of the
have a
ladle.
huge ladle. I have a big ladle because one thing fills a whole.
Yeah.
Oh,
The ladle's not a lot of
oh,
volume.
Ladle's not a lot of volume.
Yeah.
And moreover, and this is what's going to be discussed in SIF 1, is how much of the ladle do you have to measure against?
Wow.
The entire ladle or just the amount that was dipped into the soup?
Okay.
So what did I do? I went to the bottom because I wanted to get a meat chunk out, or I just scoop at the top because I wanted to get rid of the like the what's the like the white stuff that comes up at the top of the soup. So all I used was I scooped out the edge there. So how much of my ladle went in when I did that? Or did I go all the way to the bottom because I wanted to get the meat? Now much more of my ladle. So how much do I have to measure? And that might change. Different opinions as we're going to see in the commentaries. If it's a metal ladle, there is strong reason to say that no matter how much you dipped in, you got to go 60 against the ratio of the entire ladle.
Yeah.
Because you have in the Gemara Pesachim, you have a principle, which is when it comes to metal, cham b'ktsasai, cham kulai. Metal is, once a little bit becomes hot, the whole thing becomes hot.
Plastic is better.
So plastic is much better.
less of a problem.
Or a wood ladle, which is also not uncommon to cook with a wood ladle. So let's so there's an example. You're making a you're making a milchik shakshuka, and using, or I don't know, using a wood ladle to scoop out one of those eggs, right? And that was a meat ladle. It's not that deep of a dish. How deep did the wood spoon go in? Not that much. If you're making a lot of that shakshuka, you might be able to nullify it by 60.
So I think what you're saying is at the end of the day, it's like guesswork, guesstimate.
No, you can
It's a guess.
You can actually measure. You take a ladle, put it into water, and see how much water comes out.
Yeah.
You measure any volume.
But you're only measuring not about the content, only about
The volume of the
only
item.
about the volume of the ladle.
Right. So you take another.
So you guessed it.
No. You take like any science. You measure the volume. You take a full bowl of water. You know how many ounces there are in that bowl. You dip your ladle into that bowl. You take your
You see
ladle
how much
out.
it goes up.
However much is missing. That's the volume of your spoon.
So you need 60 times.
No, you have
You
to
need
put
60
it,
times,
no,
yeah.
you have to put it in the water,
Yeah.
and then you have to see how much the water
No,
level.
the water will
went
the water will overflow.
up. No, how much the water level went up, and you had a way to
Yeah,
measure it, so
yeah.
now you know what the
You
volume
can do that
of the
also.
ladle is.
Yeah, the common way is you make it full to the top. You measure how much water you have before, dip the spoon in, take it out, see how much is missing, and the difference is the volume of your spoon. Which shouldn't be too much. It shouldn't be too much when you're dipping your ladle in. It really shouldn't be too much. Okay, so that's going to be in Tzadik Daled
I mean,
Seif Aleph.
anything is a big deal. If an ounce of water comes out, 60 ounces is a lot.
A 60-ounce soup is so crazy,
Same.
and I don't think your
60 ounce
spoon's going to make an ounce go out.
60-ounce soup is a bigger soup.
It's a bigger soup, and I don't think your ladle is going to make an ounce come out.
No,
If you pushed it in straight, then you're like pushing it out like that. But if you
no,
Like,
no,
put it in
you
sideways.
You put it careful.
get a full ounce, I don't think so.
No, yeah.
I don't think so. Try it at home. Do a scientific experiment. Let us
But
know how it
again,
goes.
I get how you can measure.
Yeah.
I get that. I get it.
Yeah, so there's going to be discussions about like, do we rely on memory? I remember I only dipped in this much, or I know I'm certain because all I did was scraped off the edge. So to what degree you rely on memory of whether you dipped in or not? Right? Because obviously there was a lack of awareness here at this point because you used a milchik ladle for a fleshik spoon for a fleshik pot. So obviously you weren't thinking clearly. So how much can I rely on my memory to say that, no, I only did the edge, not all the way in. Or you say, look, the pot's only so tall, the soup's only so big. So even if I went to the bottom, it couldn't have been the whole thing.
Oh,
Right.
can you trust a non-Jew? Let's say
You trust them? Yeah.
Like,
well,
let's say like you're in a restaurant, you know what I'm saying, you have a non-Jew working or.
it's all going to be there.
Yeah.
It's all going to be discussed in the commentaries here because there are certain things you can know for sure. So let's say, for example, the ladle is X big, and the soup was X big.
Yeah.
So even if it went all the way in, there's a certain maximum of how much it could be,
That shows that, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So you know the maximum already, and most likely it didn't go all the way to the bottom unless he was trying to get something at the bottom, right? So all these factors are going to play into deciding how much you measure.
Well, the stem
content.
makes a very small difference. The stem, in terms of the volume.
It still make a small difference unless it's a metal one, in which you have to measure everything because according to some opinions, because kula. Okay, this is our learning for this week. Clear? Any thoughts, comments, questions? Okay, God willing, Wednesday we will get to the practical application of Tzaddik Gimel, which is really going to be a lot of fun. The practical application of I used the wrong pot, and whether it's considered kosherizing, and I used meat, dairy in between. I used the parve in between, and what happens? Okay, all of that God willing on Wednesday. Have a wonderful day and a good luck, everybody. And we share Pesuras Tevis for our community and for the whole Klal Yisrael.
Yeah,
Where is the?
Levaya is today at 2:30 at the Russian Center.
oh, we do know already?
Yeah, it's posted.
2:30?
Yeah, 45 at the yeshiva, right? That's what.
That means they're gonna make a.
Sorry, say again?
Levaya.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're doing an actual Levaya in the shul, like 15 minutes to.
No, it's other car drive. That's what.
No, so apparently it's 2:00. There, read the
2:30.